Good morning, fight fans. Mike's MMA Picks here. Just sharing a few of my thoughts about this UFC Fight Night 138 in Moncton, Canada. We have a number of dangerous spots here, especially from a DraftKings perspective. It's really hard to hang your hat on 6 fighters who could potentially come through at the salaries that we've got. We can get things started right now. I'm gonna make this video very quick, and I'll just share my leans on some of these fights. So, first fight right off the bat, we've got Stevie Ray back against the wall, $8,300, taking on Jason Ayari, who's dropping down from welterweight. Ayari, when I've watched tape on him and tried to get into his mindset for this fight, I understand why people may be looking at the odds, and that he's priced at 7,900 for a plus 135 favorite. You're going to need some dogs to come through here, but Stevie Ray, besides the Lozon fight, is typically a tough out. And I think that Stevie Ray, well, he's going to be fighting out of TriStar, right? We've got 4 TriStar fighters on this card. I'm leaning Stevie Ray, although the odds are not moving in my favor. Minus 145 for Stevie Ray. So that's that fight. I'm going to lean Stevie Ray in that fight. Then next up, we got Archon Buehler against Marcelo Golm. Marcelo Golm, the young Brazilian, who really, it's hard to look good against a guy like Tim Johnson. And I believe he fought Colombo before that. But Golm, he's an active fighter when he has space. This fight is concerning from a DraftKings perspective because there may be a number of stalemates here. I do love Golm's price at 7,400. Golm's back up to a plus 135 underdog. Buehler's going to be sneaky at 8,800, but I don't think he has fight-ending power, and he doesn't seem to advance when he gets takedowns. Likes to hold his opponent there. So my preferred play on this fight is Marcelo Golm. Next up, we have this should be an action-packed fight, although I'd like to see one of the fighters use his wrestling more. We've got T. Edwards against Don Madge. Madge looks very impressive on the tape, but this is a big step up in competition. I actually went back and watched T. Edwards' wrestling matches at Arizona State as well as Old Dominion. He transferred back to Old Dominion for his senior year and was ranked in the top 20 in the U.S. So what's shocking to me, I watch a lot of his film, and he doesn't use his wrestling in his fights, at least offensively. I think that Madge hasn't fought an opponent like Edwards before. Edwards comes out of the MMA lab, and he is coached up for this fight. So I understand the $9,400 price tag on Edwards, and Madge. I see people getting sucked into playing him because they watch his highlight reel. But one concerning thing for Edwards, though, is his lack of output on the feet. I know it only takes one punch to end things, but you're going to need a high point total at 9,400 and not just one punch in the first round. I think you're going to need to have him hopefully use some of his wrestling, and we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Next up, we got Sarah Moras at 8,700 against Talita Bernardo. This fight, I wish it wasn't happening. skill level, at least athleticism level, is very low. Bernardo seems to gas in just about every fight. The one thing she's got going for her is her grappling. At least if she can land some takedowns, which she'll try them anywhere. She could potentially surprise a few people, because Maras, I was reading some tweets yesterday that she's looking to keep things standing, and I don't see how she could find some new success standing. She got who doesn't get pieced up against Pudilova, right? But for $8,700, you're going to need her to pay off that price tag, and maybe a submission's in order. She likes to play off of her back, but against Bernardo, I don't think that's a person you want to be you want to have on top of you. So this fight is a pass for me, though I can understand having some shares of either fighters in GPP. I don't see these fighters being very active at all. Except on the ground, you could get a submission from either fighter. And look at their records. My gosh, we've got 5-4 against 5-3. I don't understand why this fight is on a UFC card. Let's continue on. We'll try and pick up the pace right now. So Calvin Kattar, 9,100 against Chris Fishgold up next. Kattar, very active on the feet. He is coming in against a fighter with a 17-1 record who is, he's coming in with a lot of steam. Not only because of his record, but a lot of the folks on the other side of the pond speak very highly of Chris. And I think that we have an opportunity here, at least from a DraftKings perspective, to get some points out of Fishgold. For 7,100, you're looking at those lower tiered fighters, and Fishgold, in my opinion, may be a good punt, because the fight ends inside the distance odds isn't great for either fighter, and I see Kattar. He's the bigger guy, at least the taller guy. Fishgold's the thicker guy. I was watching the weigh-ins, and Fishgold's a tough out. Hasn't been knocked out in his professional career. I expect Kattar to light him up on the feet, but we'll see what happens when Fishgold closes distance. Kattar could run away with this fight. This is a fight where we're going to learn a lot about, just like Brett Johns and other folks from Europe who haven't really been tested in the United States. We're going to learn a lot, but I like Kattar to win the fight. I like Fishgold from a DraftKings perspective. Next up, we've got Thibaut Goudy against Nasrat Haqparast. Nasrat, I was able to get on him at plus 245 last fight against Diakaze. The word's out now. Nasrat's the real deal. His mind's right. The only thing that he has going against him is this DraftKings price at 9,700. That's ridiculous. Goudy put up a tough fight against Sage Northcutt. $6,500 for Goudy. I suspect that Goudy is going to wilt under Nasrat's pressure. Nasrat has a great ground game too, so I'd be careful about playing the wins by knockout or TKO prop. But I do expect Nasrat to win inside the distance. The only problem is when you're constructing lineups for $9,700, you are in a tough spot the rest of the way to find 5 other fighters who you think can come through. And that's the theme throughout this card, is that there are only a few real locks that I feel are out there, and Nasrat seems to be one of them. But I mean, he's, look at the odds here. He's dropped to minus 750, but that's rough. I believe Nasrat's inside the distance props right now are at minus 210. All right, next up, we've got Nordine Taleb against Sean Strickland. Nordine Taleb comes in at the higher priced fighter at 8,200. Sean Strickland, 8,000. Taleb is another tri-star fighter. We've got 4 of them fighting on this card. Hometown Canadian. Strickland, I don't think we got to see everything that he had been working on in the Zaleski fight. I don't put too much stock into him getting knocked out there. I expect him to use his wrestling here. I know from a DraftKings perspective, he's not the most high output guy, but in the second and third round of this fight, I expect him to take over and show us some of that stuff that we've seen behind the scenes at, I believe, Team Quest and other gyms that he's been at. So I'm going to roll with, I like Sean Strickland here in this fight. But be careful, be wary of the judges because this is a Canadian card. Up next, we've got another tri-star fighter in Alex Garcia taking on Court McGee. Court McGee can be had for $7,700. Alex Garcia at $8,500. Alex Garcia, actually, I thought he did pretty well in the Ryan LaFleur fight. This is another fighter it's hard to look good against Ryan LaFleur. So Garcia's got the wrestling. He's got the power. My only real concern for Garcia is he seems to wilt in the latter rounds in most of his fights, and McGee tends to turn it up in the second and third round. So I like McGee as a GPP play. I like Garcia to win the fight, though. Sneaky. McGee might be a sneaky play. If you have the chance, go back and listen to the media scrum for Court McGee. It's 15 minutes, and he talks about the high that he gets from breaking fighters, just feeling them break. And he loves that rush. He's been searching for it every fight, so he's hoping to get it here. And Garcia is one of those guys who could break. But this is a decent fight to target because Garcia is going to be looking for those takedowns. And another thing is Court McGee, less than a year ago, actually in January, he had a labrum repair. I've actually had 2 of those done. I'm not saying, I'm not a professional fighter, but I do know what type of rehab goes into that surgery. And to know that he's fighting about 9 months after that's pretty incredible. At his 33 years of age, he's had 7 now surgeries. So just something to keep an eye on. Up next, very interesting fight, Andre Sukupta against Jonathan Martinez. We've got Sukupta coming in at 8,600. Odds have been dropping like a rock for him. He opened at a minus 245 favorite. Now he's down to minus 150. You've got Jonathan Martinez, Texas fighter, 9-1 record on the regional scene, has had a few opportunities to jump in at the UFC level, but for whatever reason, it didn't happen. Martinez, smaller fighter. I didn't like what I saw from Martinez on the scale yesterday at weigh-ins, but Sukupta, it's really hard to put faith in him because of his lack of output, his poor in-fight decision-making, and but he could potentially get a finish here, Sukupta. Odds are telling us that Martinez is a live dog at plus 140, but I'm on the fence with this fight. I see a lot of people being off of Sukupta and him being a nice play on DraftKings and GPPs because he may knock this kid out. That's the other thing. Martinez is a young man. He's only 24 years old. So keep an eye on this fight. And I do like Sukumta here, but I'm staying away from him from a wagering perspective. And this fight is supposed to go the distance. So we'll see what happens with this fight. This is another reason this card is so dangerous to play from a DraftKings perspective. How are we supposed to believe that that Andre Sukumta is going to come out and do the right thing here? But that's why we play these cards, right? I mean, there's always money to be made. All right, here we go. Last three fights on the card. We've got Misha Cirkunov against Patrick Cummins. Patrick Cummins, $6,900 against Misha Cirkunov, who's coming in at $9,300. Cirkunov is a quick starter, likes to get the finish early, either by knockout or by submission. Cummins is going to look to stall the fight out. He's going to look to wrestle. He will probably take some damage. And the question here is, can he weather Cirkunov's early storm? Because if he can, then Cummins does have a shot here. Cirkunov has been sparked out a few times recently, and although he has a 13-4 record, he hasn't fought the best competition in the world. Cirkunov typically, he's usually fights out of Canada. He's been out west. If you have the opportunity to listen to all the media scrum interviews and interviews leading up to the fight, I find that that's a huge advantage into not only assessing a fighter mindset, but also just seeing what they've been up to. And so Cirkunov seems to be taking this very seriously. At 9,300, I expect him to be a very popular play because Cummins, in a lot of respects, is a sitting duck out there. If you can keep distance and land on him. If not, it could be a challenge. Last two fights on the card. Hang on. Come here, bud. Last two fights on the card, we've got Michael Johnson against Artem Lobov. Michael Johnson, $9,500 against Artem Lobov. Lobov at $6,700. Hang on one second. Sorry about that, friends. So last two fights on the card here. We've got Michael Johnson, $9,500 against Artem Lobov. I expect this to be a cakewalk for Michael Johnson. The only question is, does Michael Johnson finish? It's plus odds for him to finish right now, and I respect Lobov's not only wanting to give Michael Johnson his purse back, but also for missing weight, but also just his attitude heading into this fight. Says all the right things, but look at his record. You know, this is a sub 500 fighter. There's a huge reach discrepancy here. The only thing Michael Johnson has to worry about is himself. If he gasses himself out, then Lobov, who is very hard to put away. I was actually shocked by how many punches and strikes he eats in many of his fights. But from a DraftKings perspective, that's if you're on Michael Johnson, those strikes are going to add up, and Michael Johnson is a safe play. So I wonder, you know, are people going to pay up for Nasrat, or are they going to drop down to Michael Johnson? Or is that just are those too high of a price tag to pay for that fight? So of course I like Johnson here in this fight, but the question is, can he finish, and is he going to be content sticking and moving? And I think he's actually going to go for the finish here. This is a co-main event, and he seemed to be in really good shape, like he always is, headed into his fights. I mean, people are getting on Michael Johnson's case for the Gaethje fight, but he was connecting on him like it was. I mean, it's really tough to put Gaethje out, but he had his moments in that fight. And throughout the course of history, Michael Johnson has the speed, the power, and he doesn't have to worry about getting taken down in this fight. So, looking forward to this one. And I'm happy with this co-main event. And then we have the main event. So this is a really tough fight to call. Volkan Ozdemir against Anthony Smith. Initially, early in the week, I was higher on Ozdemir. As I dug into things, it became obvious Ozdemir's striking defense. It doesn't seem like it's a priority for him. He is constantly on the offensive. And I honestly think that that's what it's going to take to beat somebody like Anthony Smith. But Anthony Smith, he's got so much going for him right now as far as momentum, mindset. He looks great, although I know people are getting on his case for beating dinosaurs in the UFC. But Anthony Smith, has a huge opportunity here, and he really wants to seize the moment. So it's hard not to stack this fight in cash. The fight odds to end inside the distance, we're hovering around minus 925, so this fight should end inside the distance. Ozdemir, there were two things that really concerned me. One that I like about Ozdemir is that his coach, Henry Hooft, they do a lot of analysis and game planning, and he's had a long time to prepare for 5-round fights recently, and he's been on the big stage. Anthony Smith came out and said that he doesn't watch any tape. He feels the fight out, and he goes and does whatever needs to be done. But when I watch Anthony Smith's fights, it seems evident that that's the case, because he gets put in these crazy situations where he lets himself get reversed. He just throws caution to the wind. That's why this fight should end quickly. Ozdemir, he possesses massive power. This is a big guy. I know they both looked pretty large on the scales. Actually, Anthony Smith looked a little bit bigger, but I think Ozdemir also cuts a lot of weight too. Or cuts much more weight than Anthony Smith does. So I'm leaning Ozdemir here, but I would be careful picking one side or the other of this fight, because the odds have tightened significantly. I'm looking here at one point, 180. Volkan was minus 185, minus 190. He was all over the place. Now he's down to minus 163. So overall, to close things out, very interesting card from a DraftKings perspective. For $8,400 and $7,800 respectively, the main event should be in play to be on the optimal lineup. You're going to have to make some hard choices about some underdogs if you want to get those 6 wins and possibly take down a GPP. Cash games should be interesting this week. You can follow me at Twitter, MikesMMAPicks. I'm also on CapperTech as well as BetMMA.tips. Want to wish everybody a great Saturday and a wonderful event, prosperous event at UFC Moncton. Have a great day, folks.